Hey, what is going on, Guardians? Gray here with another Destiny 2 PvP video. In today's video, we're going to be taking a deep dive into the Sentinel subclass for Titans. I'm going to share some tips and tricks and things that you can do to play this subclass as effectively as possible inside of the Crucible. So if you guys are down for that, and if you enjoy the video, please leave a like below and consider hitting that subscribe button for me and turn on those notifications so you don't miss any of my future videos. There will be timestamps down in the description of the video so you can hop around and get whatever information you are looking for directly. But with that being said, let's dive into the video and start off with the fundamentals of the Titan class. So starting off, I always like to take a look at the fundamentals of every subclass. It's always a good idea to refresh yourself on all the basics before diving into some of the more intricate parts of these subclasses inside of Destiny. So looking at the Titan class here, there's a couple things I want to go over. When it comes to your class ability, you have two choices. You have Towering Barricade and Rally Barricade. I'm going to go ahead and flat out say that the Rally Barricade is pretty much useless inside of PvP. It's just not a good option. The Towering Barricade is much larger and it serves its purpose much better. It creates actual cover for you and your team to be behind. And the only benefit that the Rally Barricade really has is that it will give you that increase to reload speed while you're behind it. But that's so hard to play around inside of the Crucible, and it's so easy to get shot while you're trying to hide behind it. It's just not a good option. For all Titan subclasses, I always recommend running the Towering Barricade. Looking at our movement abilities, we of course have our 3 different jump options. I always go with Strafe Lift. It's what I'm most comfortable with, and I feel it provides the best mobility to get in and out and around the map as quickly as possible. Provides you with a big burst of directional momentum, whatever direction you're heading, and it just makes it so you can sort of skate around a little better. If you do it in quick succession, you can build up a lot of speed and momentum, and it's going to help you get around the map very quickly. I know some people use Catapult Lift, but in my personal experience, if I'm playing against a Titan using Catapult Lift, it is so easy to shoot them out of the sky. Once they hit the peak of their jump, they're kind of a sitting duck, and it's really easy to take them out. And for that reason, I always recommend Strafe Lift. You can stay low to the ground while moving very quickly, and I use it on almost all of my Titan subclasses. Moving on to the grenade abilities, there's a couple of things I want to talk about. Sentinels are the only subclass in the game that has access to the suppressor grenade. This thing is extremely powerful. I'm sure you've seen it if you play Crucible, but I'll read it here. It says it's an explosive grenade that suppresses enemies, preventing them from using their abilities for a short time. It will also take Guardians out of their super, and it prevents them from being able to use their jump, their class ability, grenade, melee, just about anything. And like I said, they're the only class that has access to this grenade. And for that reason, when you're playing Sentinel in the Crucible, I consider it almost a must to take this grenade. You can use the Void Wall and the Magnetic Sticky Grenade. They're strong options, but they just don't offer the utility that the Suppressor Grenade offers, and you're really missing out by not taking it when you're playing Sentinel. So now that we have the basics covered of this subclass, let's dive into some of the more intricate parts of it and talk about the actual perks and nodes within the class itself. Alright, so here we are taking a look at the Sentinel subclass itself. For all intents and purposes, I really recommend the top tree for Sentinel. I feel it offers the best all-around neutral game and is also very potent inside of PvP. Taking a look at top tree, we'll look at the melee ability first. We have Defensive Strike. It states defeat an enemy with this melee ability to create an overshield around you and nearby allies. Final blows will grant melee energy when you have the overshield up. It's a very powerful melee ability, and we'll talk about how it works really well with our loadouts a little later in the video. But this is very strong for being just a truck and playing into that fantasy of the Sentinel Titan. You can slide in with your shotgun, finish them off with a melee, and you're going to be granted an overshield. It'll buff your allies, and it lets you move into your next engagement with 100% confidence because you have that overshield. It leads into the next perk, Turn the Tide, where your overshield from Defensive Strike lasts longer, and it increases your melee damage and reload speed. Again, that lends into that snowball effect. Once you get that first initial melee kill, you're going to have the buff for a little while, making it easier to clean up kills following that initial defensive strike kill, and you can just snowball with it. You also have Rallying Force, which is, I want to talk about it a little bit because this says melee kills restore health for you and nearby allies. This is just important to understand. This doesn't mean your charged melee ability. Even just a neutral melee kill will give you that health restoration, and it does it for your allies as well. So it may seem like this subclass is all centered around your melee ability, but that's actually really strong inside of the Crucible when you play with the proper loadouts. We have a very powerful melee ability that gives you an overshield, it gives you a melee damage buff, it's restoring your health, and it gives your allies some of these benefits as well. It's very, very strong, especially if you play with a coordinated team. The final perk here in the subclass is, of course, the Ward of Dawn. Well, when your super energy is full, you can hold your super button to drop your bubble on the ground. And this is a very cool super. It's probably, in my mind, the most underrated super in the game because it lasts for 30 seconds. That's longer than any other super in the game, and it has some very tactical, you can do some very tactical things with it, especially in competitive game modes. You can, when you drop the bubble on the ground, it's going to give you Armor of Light for 30 seconds. That serves as a timer, letting you know how much time is left on your bubble, but also grants you that overshield while you're inside. You're also going to get the Weapons of Light damage bonus as well for yourself and any allies that step inside of your bubble. It's a very tactical super. You can drop it on a contention point inside of the map. On control, you can drop it on one of the points you're capturing. Trials of Osiris, if you go into overtime, you can cap that final point using the bubble. And Weapons of Light is a very powerful buff. It's going to make it so you can get shotgun kills from ridiculous ranges. It's going to lower the TTK on all of your weapons, and it's very powerful to use in conjunction with your allies. If you work as a team, it can be very, very powerful. But it's nice that you also have the utility to pop your regular super. You don't have to use the bubble if you're not in a situation where it's going to be beneficial for you. You can use your regular Captain America super, pull out your shield and throw that around, and use a regular roaming super as well. It's very cool to have that utility on this subclass. Moving on, we're going to look at some of the weapon loadouts we use that I think pair well with this subclass, as well as the armor and stats you're going to want to run with this subclass. Moving on, I want to talk about some of the weapon loadouts you can run with this subclass that I find the most success with, as well as some of the armor and mods that I recommend running as well. Starting off looking at the weapons, I am going to 100% recommend that you use a shotgun with this subclass. It is built from the ground up for close quarters combat. Like we talked about in that previous segment, it is all about your melee ability, and being able to clean up some of your shotgun kills with a melee ability is just the bread and butter of playing a shotgun playstyle. You're going to be cleaning up a lot of those, getting those overshields, and just being able to be just a Mack truck running over the enemy team. It's extremely strong. You could, of course, use like a sidearm or a fusion rifle if you really want to. As long as you're playing into that close quarters combat style, I would still say shotguns are your best bet. In this situation in particular, I've really been diving into the Astral Horizon shotgun. I really enjoy this one a lot. It has some really cool rolls. This one in particular plays into the subclass even more. I've got a quick draw swashbuckler roll here, and swashbuckler is, of course, a buff that you will receive on your weapon when you get melee kills. So when you get that overshield melee kill, you're going to get 5 times swashbuckler on your shotgun, making it easier to get your next shotgun kill on top of having that overshield rocking for you at the same time. It's a very powerful combination. I really, really enjoy it a lot, and it lends to some insane clips like that one in the background you saw where I go from being in my bubble to earning another super in less than 1 minute, and I get like 8 or 9 shotgun kills inside that clip. It just is absolutely lethal. You can pair that with any sort of meta weapon, and I'm sure I'll catch some grief for this a little bit, but the Gnawing Hunger is a perfect weapon to pair with the Astral Horizon shotgun. It's a nice energy auto rifle. It has an insane time to kill. There's not a lot of energy hand cannons that are going to be viable next season right now. We have like the Waking Vigil, which isn't bad. The Jack Queen King can be good. I personally don't enjoy it. And then of course we have the most abandoned weapons in all of Destiny, Luna's Howl and Not Forgotten. Those are definitely options, but they just make me sad more than anything because they used to be so much better than they are now. But you can of course use Fellwinter's Lie or Mindbender's Ambition in the energy slot and use a kinetic hand cannon as well if you want. Those are going to be my recommendations for weapons. This thing is just built for shotgunning from the ground up. Looking at the armor, there's a couple things I want to talk about stat-wise. Of course, when it comes to the Crucible inside of Destiny, you're going to want to prioritize two main stats over anything else, and that's going to be recovery and intellect. Recovery is going to make it so we can get back into the fight much quicker. So if you do take damage, you can get behind cover, you'll regen your health faster, putting you back into the action as fast as possible. And of course, intellect determines our super cooldown. The higher you can have that stat, the better. It's just going to make it easier to get your super before other people on the other team. And it just lends itself, especially in competitive game modes, it's really going to give you an upper hand. If the game drags out to further and further rounds, you'll be able to get more supers than the enemy team. So try to spec into those two stats as much as you can. The other ones are important, I would say. Having your melee ability, of course, is going to be strong for this, but recovery and intellect above all else. Something I do personally on all of these builds, especially when I'm playing in the bigger playlist, is the Charged with Light package I like to run on all of my gear, and that involves using 3 mods. We use Taking Charge, which makes it so we become charged with light when we pick up any orb of light. We use Stacks on Stacks, which makes it so whenever we do pick up those orbs, we gain 2 stacks of charged with light instead of just 1. And then finally, we use High Energy Fire, which lets us utilize those charges of light to gain a damage bonus to our weapon damage. It's a 20% damage buff. It's very strong and super easy to take advantage of. You just throw these mods on your gear, and this is going to happen passively, especially in those big game modes. If you have masterwork weapons, you're making orbs like crazy. Your teammates will be dropping orbs. It's really easy to take advantage of those damage bonuses. So that's going to be it for weapons and loadouts. I want to talk about a couple of exotic pairings that go well with this subclass in this next segment. Alright guys, so we're approaching the end of the video. I greatly appreciate it if you stuck around through the whole thing, or if you're using the timestamps to hop around, that is awesome as well. But before we close out the video, I want to talk about a couple of exotic armor pieces that you could pair with this subclass that make for some very lethal combinations. Number one on that list is of course going to be what I would say is the most meta exotic for Titans right now, and that's the Dune Marcher's exotic legs. These things have been at the top of the game since Season of the Worthy. They're very strong, and a common misconception is that they actually work with any subclass. You don't have to use an arc subclass for these to work, and these work very well with Sentinel because we're all about our melee ability. You're going to be sprinting a lot, you're going to be sliding in and getting those melee kills. Being able to proc the Doom Marcher's effect off of that is very strong. If you don't know, this has the Linear Actuators perk where it increases your sprint speed, and sprinting will build up a static charge. After meleeing an enemy, that charge will chain damage to nearby enemies, and it's like a 30-meter range. It's actually ridiculous. I would say it's probably going to get nerfed at some point in the future, maybe. Bungie hasn't touched it yet, so they might think it's okay where it's at, but it's a very strong exotic. Another quick one I want to shout out is the Syntheseps exotic gauntlets. These pair very well with the subclass as well. These have the Biotic Enhancement perk, where it increases your melee lunge range, and you get improved melee and super damage when you're surrounded by multiple enemies. You're not often going to get that damage bonus unless you're really yeeting into the fray and getting into the combat, but that increased melee lunge range, I'll show some clips here in the background, it really increases how far you can lunge with that melee range. You can just sort of pepper someone with your shotgun from far away and clean up with that melee from almost like a 7 or 8 meter range. It's actually ridiculous. Some of the clips you can see I'm really almost flying up in the sky to clean up some of those melee kills. Definitely a solid option if you don't have a good roll on the Doom Marchers, or if you don't have the Doom Marchers yet at all. Not a bad option to roll with these Syntheseps. They used to be extremely meta back in year 1 of Destiny 2, and they're still a good pairing for this subclass. A quick honorable mention I want to give, if you really want some cheeky kind of gameplay, is the Helm of Saint 14. This one isn't exactly the most upfront and beneficial exotic, but it can be really fun when your team plays into your super. This has the Starless Night perk, where enemies that enter into your bubble are blinded, and which means they can't see anything at all. Their screen goes completely white, and your allies that pass through the bubble will get an overshield that they can carry outside. Guarding with your Sentinel shield will also blind nearby enemies if you don't pop your bubble. It's pretty backloaded in the super. I tend to avoid things that do that, but this can be so much fun if your team plays into your super. I thought I'd throw it on the list because it's definitely worth using and trying out if you want to mess around inside of the Crucible. So that's going to do it for the video, guys. That's my deep dive into the Sentinel subclass. I recently watched Patty Cake's video where him and a couple other content creators ranked every subclass in the game. It was a huge collaborative effort, and they ranked this one in the A tier, and I would agree with that pairing for the most part. There's definitely some subclasses that perform a little better than this one, but if you pair this with the right exotics and loadouts and your teammates play into the strengths, this can be a top tier subclass. It's extremely competitive, and it's one of my favorite subclasses to play everywhere inside of the Crucible. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video, found it educational or informative in any way. If you did, please consider leaving a like below and hitting that subscribe button, turning on those notifications. It's a free way to support me here on the channel. We're getting ready for Beyond Light, getting hyped. I know we're kind of in that dry period right now, but it'll be there before we know it. Thank you guys for checking out the video. I appreciate your time. I'll see you in the Crucible. Take care.